Okay, so we're back into this familiar old drawing here, and I've got a couple windows already built. So remember that what we're doing with the windows is similar to what we did with the doors. There's one distinct step, and that's to add the visibility states. So what that allows me to do is to just kind of shuffle between two different options. In this case, working somewhat like a layer manager in switching back and forth between a window that would fit in a 100 and a window that would fit in a 150 wall. So there I have the wider 150 wall, and I just copied that down and inserted it in this sort of interior partition 100 millimeter wall. And it still stretches just like we saw with the door, but it's got the shorter jambs. So I'm going to build that real quick, just over to the side here, and talk about visibility states. Make sure I'm in my Windows layer. And I'll just build the geometry real quick. I'm going to use REC, the keyboard shortcut for rectangle, and just create a 50 millimeter by 150 millimeter window jamb. And then I'll use CP, which is the keyboard shortcut for copy, and I'll drag that over. I dragged it over 950 millimeters. The size doesn't really matter. Because of course we're going to add the stretch command, which would give us the option to make it whatever size we wanted in the end anyway. So I'll build that one up, and then I'm going to copy this all down, and I'm just going to remember this designated amount here, say 300 millimeters. Copy it down, modify it, and then move it back the same amount. So I want this now to be my second set of geometry for my 100 millimeter wall. So I'm just going to stretch that up 50 millimeters, and I'm also going to move that glass line to the middle. So there's the geometry for my shorter window. I'm going to change the color on these just for the sake of a little bit of a graphic clarity. So the shorter one will be red, and then I'll make this a darker color so it shows up a little better in the block editor as well. Just go with the darker color there. Okay, and I'll move this back into place. Remember, I just moved it by 300 millimeters, so I'll just use the same amount to move it back into place. Last thing I need here is the wipeout. So I'll just type that in, wipeout, make my 4 corner points, just like I was making a polyline. Drag out to the left and hit letter C to close it. Now it disappears, of course, because at the moment it's over top of the window jambs and the glass lines. So I'll type in wipeout and hit F for frames, turn the frame on, and then I'll click it and right click, and with draw order I'll send it to back. Very important step there. I don't see how you could get any further without that step anyway, because you won't be able to see anything. But I've seen a few cases where students have forgotten to set that up, and then go back and do it retroactively becomes a little messy. So make sure that that's in place before you go into the block editor. And then the last thing we have to do is just stretch that wipeout up and down from the top and the bottom. And I'm going to use my stretch command again, using shift to deselect the jambs. I don't want to stretch those, just want to stretch the wipeout up 10 millimeters. And I'll do it again on the bottom here. Okay, and I'm ready to go. So I'll start creating a block out of this now by hitting the letter B. And I'll name this my dynamic window test. Oh, I think I'm on to about 10 now. And I will make sure that I've got base point specified on screen selected. I want to make sure that I've got open and block editor selected. And then I'm just going to click select objects. Now this is an important step. When you click here, you want to see that it says 7. You get that prompt down the command line that tells you how many objects you've got selected. I want to see 7. This is so much easier to do if you use rectangles as opposed to individual lines. And then if I see more than 7 or less than 7, I know I've done something wrong with the geometry and I don't want to see that. Okay, so that is a good important check step there, and it shows up in the block definition editor as well. So with that all done, I'm going to click OK. It'll prompt me for a base insertion point, which I will make right here in the upper left corner. That point will be common to both size windows, and then it throws me into the block editor. So really quick, I'm just going to set up the linear parameter. That's familiar to you from building the doors. So I'm going to click linear parameter, and I'm going to specify the base point on the upper left, stretch over to the upper right for the second point, drag up just to place the text, and then I'm going to click on that new text, which is the parameter itself, and I will right click and reduce the grip display to 1. Okay, and I can also, if I like, if it helps me kind of organize things on screen here, change the default text, which says distance 1 at the moment, to something more relevant like window width. Okay, now that parameter is all set up. What's the next step once I set a parameter up? Yeah, so then always action follows the parameter, so I click on the action, and with this one I'm just going for a stretch, and there's no angle offsets or overrides to worry about. So this one's pretty straightforward. I just click on the parameter. The start point will be on the right hand side. I just want the change to occur on the right side, so I click there, and I create a stretch frame that will capture the ends of those objects on the right, and then what I want to stretch will be the wipeout and then the jams and the glazing lines on the right side. Hit enter. I see the action icon appear, so I'm all done. Except for the step where I kind of build in some preset sizes. And to do that, I just click on window width, and in its properties, in the parameter properties, I just change the value set from none under the distance type to list. And I click in this white box where there doesn't appear to be a button, and I click over to the right, the button appears. And then I'm just going to add, in multiples of 100, a series of presets. And these would correspond with whatever the manufacturer was offering for their windows, of course. So I'll just go steps of 100 up to 1500. Okay, and when I click OK, I'll see those gray lines indicating where those presets are located. And if I want to test it, just hit test block, and I click it once. I see my insertion point where I left it, and there's the grip that will allow me to do the stretching, and everything seems to be working properly there. Okay, so that completes the stretch portion. Now we're going to add the visibility states, which, like a layer manager, will allow us to turn some things on, turn some things off. And then back in the window, as you saw when this thing is functioning, all I have to do is just click that little grip, and then I'll be able to shuffle back and forth between the two settings. So that starts with a parameter. I click on the parameter tab, and I go to the visibility parameter. Now this time all I'm doing with the click here is I'm just locating the text or the location of the grip for when I'm back in workspace, in the model space. So it's not really a crucial click at all. I'm just going to click here because it's out of the way. It's not going to get cluttered with the other parameter. Once I've done that, now I have the option to actually set up some visibility states. So I'm going to hover over this visibility button here, click on the visibility states, and by default it gives me 1. I'm going to rename that 150, and then I'm going to click new and make another one called 100. And then with 100 current, you can see the blue check mark there. That's the one that's current. I click OK. And now I'm just going to make use of this little button off to the right here called Make Invisible. So with this 100 state being the current state at the moment, if I click on Make Invisible, I want to click on the 150 millimeter window elements, turn them off, and then I'll switch to the other state, and then I'll turn the other jams and window lines off. And that's how I set up those visibility states. So with 100 active, I'm going to click Make Invisible. I'm going to click the larger jam and the glazing line that goes with it. Hit Enter. It'll disappear. And then I'm just going to switch over to 150 and do the same thing. Now just be aware that this, for whatever reason, a little glitch in the program, I guess, doesn't allow you to switch to the current state here. You might expect that to occur, but if I click 150, for some reason it just stays at 100. So it's more reliable if you click on visibility states again, click on 150 and set that as current, and then click OK. And if you want a confirmation, just look again there. You can see 150 is current. So now I'll click on the Make Invisible button, and I'll select the shorter window jams and the glazing line and hit Enter, and they'll disappear. And now I'll just test it out. I'll be able to click on that window, stretch it, click on the visibility option here, and just shuffle back and forth between the 100 and the 150. And I close the test block window. I'll save the block, close the block editor, okay, and test it out back in model space. Okay, so you have the insertion point, which allows you to move it on. Remember, when you've got that insertion point, you don't need to actually use the move command. You can just click the window, click on the insertion point, and move it around. And the stretch is working properly, and I can switch back and forth between those elements. So I'll take one of these, and I'll move it into place on the interior partition, and stretch it to the right size. And then I'll use CP to copy it, using that same point, pull it up to the exterior wall, click it, and make that a 150. And then the last thing I have to do is just type in wipeout, and F for frames, and turn the frame off, and now it's working like it's supposed to.